Yep, we're good to go.
Great. Everyone, the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Fort Getty for Monday, March 23rd will come to order. First item is roll call. Commissioner Salmons, Commissioner, sorry, my ethics committee things are coming in my muscle memory from running those meetings. So sorry. Bill Salmons,
Yes, here.
John Botter,
Here.
Richie Smith, Cassie West.
Here.
And the chair is here. The first item is old business, and that is a discussion of the revised guiding principles and goals that were shared ahead of time. And Bill Salmons offered some suggestions, and I made a few, so they were in your packets. I don't know if anybody has any other additions that they might want to add.
So I was thinking about how we ensure that the use of the park is aligned with its purpose, and then harmonizing. I don't know where this fits in, but harmonizing the different uses of the park. That's kind of another component that might.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
So I don't know if these are part of the value, the principles, or if they're part of our goals, but kind of thinking about that we ensure that the use of the park is aligned with its purpose. And then, we have all these activities, different activities and things happening at the park, but keeping in mind that these different uses of the park are happening and how we can make sure that it's smoother.
The only issue on the first item, which makes a lot of sense, ensure that it's aligned with its purpose, is that we haven't really outlined that purpose. I know that we're going to talk about that.
So I don't know, is that a value though, or is that more of a goal, or is that just something for discussion later?
I mean, what do you think? How have you been mulling this in your brain?
Well, I don't think we should, well, so the question too is these, about the principles, like, we are using these to guide our recommendations and decisions going forward, right? And they're separate from our goals. It's just to keep in mind as, like, the purpose of the values is, how do you see us using these?
I see these as something that reflect what this ad hoc committee has considered as the way it's presenting the recommendations that it will eventually. So when we come up with recommendations, they should pretty much follow this. No one's going to say, let's have a dance club out at Getty, because it doesn't necessarily align with these things.
Right. That makes sense.
As much as we might want
a
disco at Fort Getty. On the harmonizing uses of the park, I think that's kind of what number 5 is about. So probably.
But what does that mean about harmonizing? Because we also talk about well, it's in goal 1, attracting new activities which are consistent with. I mean, harmonizing to me, if you said everything that we do there should have some coherence, I could get behind that. I don't know what harmonizing means. It means when we're trying to increase its attractiveness to a diverse set of users, right? Because by definition, they won't be harmonized. They might be in harmony. They might be coherent. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe coherent.
So where are you thinking about that? Because at this point, we're presenting these for a vote. So is there a way you?
I think it could go under 5 then, yes. 5 is talking about engaging residents and stakeholders. And so, right, as part of engaging them is ensuring that the uses of the park are all thought about coherently. Or considered, yeah.
Because Fort Getty serves campers, day visitors, families, nature seekers, boaters, fishermen, CISF users, and event goers alike, decisions should reflect that full range in a coherent way. Does that make it? Does that sound okay for people? Yeah.
If I understand the highlighting one of the first changes is in principle 1 around Fort Getty's distinctive character. The suggested edit adds in recognizing and highlighting the historic batteries.
Yeah, that was there was a question in the earlier version of, is this where we should we mention the historic, and if so, how? And Bill suggested that, and I had an earlier one where I thought about its origin and assets. It was just
Okay. I get,
yeah.
well, I wonder why we, over history, that landmass has been used by different people for different things. And I wondered why we called out the batteries specifically, as opposed to simply, talking about celebrating its past, which doesn't hem you in or isolate only one thing. I don't feel like the best thing about that place is the batteries. So
Yeah, I agree with you. And part of what I was saying with the origins and assets was actually more specific to its historic place in terms of as a war, from 1900 on, not before that. So, and it actually, my language is limiting to a lot more of the history that we might want to think about, like gypsy caravans.
Sheep farming.
Sheep farming, right, right. So maybe we just keep it more broad, recognize and highlight the history.
I think that would, I mean,
So recognize and highlight the history of Fort Getty, period.
or the historic aspects. That's fine, but I'm comfortable with the changing.
And then Bill had suggested create green buffers between uses using native trees and bushes. This seems specific to me for a principle.
I agree.
I agree we ought to do it.
Yeah. I think that would be more along the lines of recommendations that we make
Right.
Okay.
Concur.
and aligned with the principle.
I see the first principle as being about preservation. So then, right, like it would be about preserving either the native species, like preserving the landscape, maybe more broadly. If you were
I mean, I think the first sentence is probably the most important one, which is preserve the park's unbuilt, open, natural, and scenic qualities.
right.
Right.
I think that's spot on.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And recognize and highlight the history of Fort Getty. Yeah. So then we'd strike the rest, favor, and then a new sentence, favor temporary, reversible, or minimal footprint additions. Da 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 da.
Mhm.
Okay. So maybe we just take up the principles. Any other edits or anything, Richie? Do you have any edits to this?
No, I just had a question from what Cassie mentioned last week or the week before. Right now, at least we're calling it Fort Getty, but should we classify it as Fort Getty recreational area? Cassie brought that up because it always comes up as Fort Getty RV Park. How do we want to classify Fort Getty? Do we classify it as Fort Getty recreational area, Fort Getty, or just Fort Getty on its own, and then have Ray change the web pages and everything else change?
I mean, I think for the principles, saying Fort Getty is fine. I think we're going to have this conversation about how we might propose as a committee to define Fort Getty, maybe differently than it is when you look at the website or look on the town website. I mean, we don't have any power to actually do anything. We can make recommendations.
Right.
Yeah.
All of this is
Yeah.
recommended.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of our report, though, like the very first part of our report, like what, describing the introduction. And I think that's where.
That's why I thought with the distinctive character
Yeah.
to go with that it's a recreational area. But Fort Getty's fine with me.
Mhm.
I mean, these will all refer to something. They'll be referring to Fort Getty Town Park, Fort Getty Recreational, whatever. Yeah. Okay, so is there a motion to accept the revised principles as amended?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry, just a question.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the goals.
Not the goals yet. I thought I'd separate them.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. Roll call, Bill Sammons,
In favor. Aye.
John Potter,
Aye.
Richie Smith,
Aye.
Cassie West,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Great. And then the goals.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just quick. Would you be able to provide the language
Yes.
after the meeting?
Yes.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And then in terms of the goals, this was really about, as we consider this report, what the goals that we're trying to achieve. And they're in adherence with the principles, but they're more specific. So
So these goals are the same as the 2004 report, the first three, and then we added the fourth one on, which I agree with. That makes really a lot of sense.
are they exactly the same?
Number one goal, upgrade park facilities, amenities, which will enhance the appeal of the park for the residents and other visitors. That was goal one. Goal two from the 2004 report, develop additional water dependent and water enhanced active and passive recreational opportunities for residents. And goal number three is maintain positive financial revenues from current and future uses at Fort Getty that'll be available for park maintenance and improvements. I guess goal three is different for ours.
Slightly different.
Mhm.
I also think
Goal
goal
four
one
is new,
is,
isn't it?
is significantly different. I mean, in as much as goal one includes attract revenue producing opportunities, fit within the limited impact framework, facilitate community programming events. In many ways, it expands and informs what we're talking about doing with respect to improving park facilities. So, and by the way, I thought it was a pretty good goal in 2004.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the question. Do we want to stick with those goals? Do we want to revise them? I mean, it's really just a prompt conversation to see what people are thinking about.
How many goals? Are we going to just leave it so basic as goals to improve, or are we going to prioritize what we want to do before the next step? Because right now it just says improve. I don't know if we put in there, would like to get the bathroom done or get something done, or are we just leaving it vague
No,
as
I mean, those will be more specific. So these are like, what are the goals that we are, that are kind of framing what we will then be including in much more detail.
Okay.
So
Under a goal, you might have an objective then, and those are the more specific component, right? Like under each goal, you'll have like more specific.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are you thinking? I'm following very much what the prior report did, and both the reports from 94 and 2004 had clear goals that they said they were seeking to achieve through the specific recommendations they were making. And maybe we come back to these, but what I was thinking is that as we are approaching the detailed recommendation development, that if we think about the goals we're seeking to achieve through our work as a committee, it will help us narrow in some ways, or at least think about the scope of the recommendations. So
My interpretation of this straw man around goals, I mean, previously we had a conversation about whether we should set the goals then, and we decided that we would wait until after we'd got the results of the survey. I think the results of the survey almost re-emphasize the goals that existed before and made perhaps it gave us grounds for making them more specific in some ways.
mhm.
Like for instance, the addition of attracting revenue producing opportunities, but also quite a lot of confidence about trying to preserve the unbuilt, open, natural, and scenic qualities. So personally, I feel quite comfortable with the goals that have been drafted. And I think that they are supportive, or rather they are well supported by the findings from the survey so far.
I mean, on goal 2, I was specific in not using the exact same language from 2004 because they said develop additional water dependent and water enhanced active and passive recreational opportunities. I went more to enhance and left the question to you, expand? Like, I'm not sure we need to expand. We might want to do a better job with what's there. I think the idea of the additional water dependent led to the creation of CISF. I mean, I think that they can check the box in a lot of ways. And so the question really is for everybody, do we want more? Do we want different? Do we want better?
I think, well, I'm not sure if I agree with you but I don't think we should have the word increase
Okay.
in there with the water dependent. I'm not sure how much more we can add to the ramp area without creating major problems coming forward. We can enhance it, make things better, but I don't know if we can increase it more. Plus, the town has a lot of other water active or accessible resources, East Ferry, Dutch Harbor. But I would say we need to enhance the waterfront access at Fort Getty, not increase it.
To be fair, the objects of the verb are water dependent and passive recreational opportunities. Those are two different things, not necessarily both water dependent. So we could make, but personally, I think enhance is fine.
Mhm.
And I think they address the type of things that we hear in the survey folks would like. You know, we have the ability to roam on a path almost the entire way around the crown of Fort Getty. Wouldn't be hard to make it easy to join it up. You know, there's already the ability to swim off the beach, although people would like to make that to be made easier. So for me, enhance was a better verb than expand. And in some ways, there's plenty of room to do the things that are high on people's wish lists without expanding anything.
Bill?
I would agree that enhance is probably the better.
Me too.
I agree.
Enhance, okay. And attract revenue producing. That was an addition by Bill. Attract revenue producing opportunities that fit within the limited impact framework and facilitate community programming events. We've talked a lot about that. Like our job isn't to propose events, but to possibly think about recommendations that would facilitate the use of Fort Getty by others for events.
And I qualified the attract revenue producing opportunities simply because if the sky's the limit, you know, we could be building a major recreational facility or something that kind of counters the, you know, the objectives of keeping a limited impact framework.
Personally, I like that because it forces one to go back to principle one
Mhm.
to qualify all those opportunities.
Should it be a separate goal or is it okay where it is in terms of the revenue producing? Let's see, number 3 is
Yeah, it could be separate.
the revenue model, develop a sustainable revenue model. I mean, I think it's fine either way. It's there. The sentiment is there. And do we need a goal on policies? That's an item on our agenda to just raise that we need to think about that.
Yeah.
So do we want to, as a goal in this ultimate report, focus on having clear, consistent policies?
I'm trying to figure out whether what we're doing with that. I think that there ought to be a goal that the rec department has clear and consistent policies that govern the use of the Fort Getty recreation area. I'm not really sure we're going to spend a ton of time trying to figure out what the optimized, clear and consistent policies are.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels a little bit like overreach.
Yeah. I agree. I would strike it, even though I put it in there. But what do you think? Anyone?
So our recommendation would be that there should be.
I think in our recommendations, I envision something around policies.
Right.
And it might be something as simple as what John just said, is we hope that the rec has clear, consistent policies that are, you know, available on the website, transparent, blah, 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 or some principles around those policies or something, but it doesn't necessarily mean to be a goal of the committee and the committee's report.
Would we recommend certain policies to the rec then?
I think we can. I mean, that's an item in our conversation for later in this meeting. So I think we need to think about how we're thinking about policies.
Because I think there's some changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I think we can recommend policies. Yeah, I kind of agree that it may not need to be a goal here because it is not, I don't see any conflicts that have been raised to us and I don't even know what the existing policies are in writing that we might object to or want to change, but
Okay.
yeah. I would on goal 3.
Sorry, Bill, your mic might not be on if you don't mind just checking it.
Oh, it seems to be on. Maybe I'm not speaking into it clearly enough. Okay. On goal 3, I'm wondering if we can put a period after pavilion uses. Because as Rich pointed out about, conflicts being set up as we write these specifically, when we talk about the survey strongly favoring maintaining or expanding, but then the next phrase is without over reliance on uses that conflict with resident access. I mean, I think that's what we're looking to do is try to put forth a plan.
Mhm.
And so I think all that first part is very acceptable.
Do you want to strike from where you're proposing the period through the end of that sentence?
Right to the end, I would.
I think that's fine. I mean, I don't
I
think
think
we
it gets
necessarily
across.
need to
governance.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're striking goal 4.
Yes. And we can come back to these. I don't think we necessarily need to accept these today. We can
Okay.
put them in a draft
Right.
report.
Right.
How does that sound?
Mhm.
And then as we do the report, we may find some are more useful than others or missing something. Okay,
Mhm.
good.
I see our recommendations are going to be like linear from the goals, right? Under each goal, we're going to have specific components that will, that's how the 2004 report was done too, with the, recommendations and then actions taken, like create a brochure. And then the action taken was an annual camping brochure, and that would fit under goal 1 with facilitating community programming events. So I see all this very linearly.
I was just saying to someone how great it is, Cassie, that you and I are both on this committee because our brains work completely differently. You're so detail oriented, and I'm like, I have not gotten there yet at all. So, sure.
But yeah, these goals will just set us up and make it easier for us as we do our report and we go forward to kind of organize our recommendations.
Right. Yeah, they're kind of markers, and we can go back and say, okay, we're saying all of these things, but they don't match our goals at all. Or
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else on that item? If not, we'll move ahead. New business is the first item is Fort Getty financial overview, and thank you, Bill, for the good work you've done on this. And I don't know if you're going to
Sure.
show
I'm going to,
some slides.
I don't know if we have slides to show or not. It'll be
If you can just
fairly
give me
brief.
1 minute, I'll be able to pull it up.
Okay. And I'll just start with a note of appreciation. Unfortunately, Ray's not here, but Ray and Ed have put together this information, has provided it, and I wanted to get it out to the committee and others just to realize that we are talking, now maybe the term net revenue has confused people. It's not, I have not said net income, but it is revenue less expenses. And we've done a fairly good job, it looks like, of identifying all the park expenses. So the first page here is simply the park revenue for the last 9 years, and then park expenses. I've just taken the extra additional step of trying to combine what is camping revenue and what is pavilion and other revenue. And you can see in the year 2025, camping revenue, which was RV and tent wait list, the dump station and ice was 520,000. Total revenue was 617,000. And then we had 146,000 of total expenses for a net revenue or gross revenue minus expenses of $472,000. So all the,
Can I just
Actually,
ask, Bill,
yes.
what's the difference between RV reservations, tent reservations, and then camping revenue? Like what is,
so the camping revenue is the total of what.
oh, I see. Okay, great. Thanks.
So the next page is just showing that the average net revenue provided by the park, which is gross revenue less the allocated expenses, averages 484,000 annually. The average of the camping revenue is, or the net camping revenue is 454,000, and the additional is 30,000. Next page. So revenues from RV camping is certainly the largest single source, 75% of the total, followed by tent camping, pavilion rentals, daily park fees, and then other revenues of 34,000, which is daily boat parking, seasonal boat parking, and non-resident parking. Next slide. This shows a breakdown of park expenses. As we said, the total for 2025 was 146,000, primarily staff expenses, which was 47%. Electricity is 22%, water 10%, and septic another 11%. Next page. So finally, I just wanted to get in front of people what the estimated cost of electrical upgrade would be. Town has estimated a cost of 500,000. So I'll put out the caveat that, you know, we're not sure that is the correct figure anymore. We're not quite sure what that will cost, but using that as the estimated cost, which would upgrade electricity to 50 amps and install individual pedestals. I spoke in detail with Christina Collins, our town director of finance, and to understand what the bond issue to cover that would cost. As we know, voters at the 2025 budget meeting authorized a bond issue. There was some confusion. That's not mandated. It was authorized, has not been issued yet. And so according to Chris Collins, if we assume a 4.75% annual borrowing cost, the estimate of the annual amortization is 63,000. So that's over 10 years. So a total of 630,000, which is the 500,000 plus interest. But the electrical upgrade with the pedestals does allow the town to charge for electricity. So that much of that 31,000 of electrical costs for the park, I'm assuming would be RV sites, and we would be charging that back. So the net annual cost would be 32,000 per year for 10 years. For some reason, the Eagle took a look at these numbers, was very interested, kind of incorrectly reported that, oh, there'd be no cost. This would cost nothing to us. Not quite true. It's $32,000 a year for 10 years. So that's 320,000. So hopefully that clarifies some of the finances.
Is there a reason you look just electrical and not the other components of that bond? The restroom facilities, and I think there was another, was there?
Well, I think we could, well, there is part of the bond for bathrooms, and we can fold that in as well. I was looking, since it didn't impact the other costs, I did not include it, but it would be an additional cost for any bonds issued to do any of the work we think is required. But since we haven't kind of come up with what that might be, I think that is to be determined. And using the cost of a $500,000 bond, if it's going to be $1 million, we can double that. So we can pretty easily
Yeah.
anticipate what the cost might be. All right.
Do you remember where metering the water was in the various bond discussions? Because obviously that's another chunk of
Right.
cost which
Asked,
could be offset
um,
if we metered it and sold it.
Unfortunately, Cody pointed out to me that Ray is not in, and I sent in that question today to find out that Ray was not here. So I don't know if metering, I'm not sure if
Yeah, I
anyone
can
knows.
address some of those
Great.
questions, and I just wanted to add a couple of comments as well.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Thank you.
in terms of individual metering, whether it be for electricity or water, presumably it would come out of a recommendation either from this committee or the council, whether they want to pursue those opportunities. Both of those would, if you're going to go down that path, would generate additional revenue, which, Bill makes reference to. And to clear up the electrical cost, I believe the numbers you were provided for electrical cost are related to 3 meters. Those 3 meters only service RV sites. Everything else is separated out. So the guard shack, the pavilion, all very low usage, but those are separate meters. CISF is a separate meter. So the 3 meters that provide electricity to the 3 sites. So your numbers would be 100% accurate in terms of what you calculated there.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about the change in revenue from 2 years ago to now, where you saw a decline.
Right.
So part of that is a reduction in the number of sites. Just as a reminder, the council reduced the sites down to 75. So they reduced 8 sites over that period of time. And Bill hasn't done this, but in terms of forecasting out, right, in terms of cost related to the bond, right, there's also, when we did our initial calculation, similar to what Bill had done, there's also a presumption, an increase in rates over a period of time as well. So just think in your mind there, it's the net comes down because there's a presumed increase in the rental rates if there's going to continue to be RVs there. So those are just a couple of my comments. Be happy to answer any of the questions we might be able to answer.
I have 2 questions. One is the percentage, the interest percentage. Is that like an average that you found, or is that like,
That's a conservative estimate by Chris Collins herself.
okay? But today, like,
Yes.
To
It was
today,
2 weeks
right?
ago that she,
Okay.
yes. And obviously, yes, rates are subject to fluctuation.
yeah.
But I think,
Yeah,
And
so
what's
can I just address the bond
Yeah,
question in terms
yes.
of so how we
Please.
reach that assumed interest rate, right, is based upon our experience. So we just went out to bond for 3 million and change.
right.
Right. And our rate is very competitive, right? So I know people look at mortgage rates and traditional mortgage rates, but we typically have a very competitive rate in terms of when we're borrowing money. So I'd be very comfortable with that in terms of calculation at that 4.75 for analysis purpose.
And just so we know, what rate did we have to pay for the 3 million that we just borrowed?
I don't know. It
recall.
was in the 4 range though.
It was in the 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
it did not go over 5. I do recall that.
I do have a question on some of the expenses for the increase. One is the septic pumping increases. Was that because of they're charging more, or do we get more use out of the park?
No,
It went from
it's pretty-
7 to
Yeah,
13.
so the rate, as you might expect, the expense of getting that service increases. It's pretty stagnant in terms of the use, right? The volume that we're using. Keeping in mind the septic is providing septic beyond campers, right? So I know Bill doesn't carve that out. I don't think we have a means of doing that. But we pay a contractor to come pump the 2 bathrooms, pump the bathrooms located at the pavilion, and pump the dump station at the gatehouse. So all of that is the septic bill.
Okay, so there's doesn't show that there's a massive increase in use. We're not getting more day campers, we're not getting more day use, we're not getting more pavilion use. It's hard to tell.
It's just becoming more expensive for the
Mm.
service, yeah.
And then one other question on the expenses. How come the ice is expensed as a cost and it's in the profit and in the expense?
So it's a service we provide. We buy the ice and we resell it. That's why, so you'll see where we purchase the
Mm.
ice. Yeah,
We need to charge more for ice.
it's a service that we provide.
Sort of a
it-
pass through here.
Yeah, exactly. It's not making us rich down there selling ice. So.
Oh, it's not really an expense then? If you're selling it for what you buy it for, then is
No, we
there
mark
really
it
an
up.
expense?
We do mark it up. So there is a slight revenue for us on them. Not much.
So my other question is, how does the size of the number of sites or the campground affect the cost of the electrical upgrade? Like each
Yeah,
pedestal has and
Sure.
yeah.
So when we did the analysis on terms of the construction costs and replacement of the pedestals, I believe we did it based upon the presumption of 75 pedestals,
Okay.
right? I would not suggest don't take 500,000, divide by 75 and then
Right.
come up with a prorated amount. It's not that simple. There's a significant amount of infrastructure that has to go into before you start executing the number of pedestals. So I can't give you the prorated amount.
Right.
So, but that was the factor we started with.
Right. Because one of our thoughts is like what size number of sites we should have within the campground. And, there is this bond for a certain amount, it's been authorized. Maybe we kind of think about that, like the size of the campground could, fall within the scope of the electrical upgrade bond amount. I don't know if that makes sense.
It seems more in the weeds than I want to go
Right.
personally. I think that we should be at thinking about what we're proposing in terms of the number of RV spaces, tent spaces, placement should be not driven by that, personally.
And Ed, I think you could answer this, but I think you had pointed out earlier that there's going to be quite an expense to even bring a larger electric conduit down Fort Getty Road, which presumably is part of that cost, correct?
Yeah, so when we looked at the project, right, in terms of when we looked at it with an engineer, we presume there's enough electricity coming into the park, right? But there's work that has to happen to distribute that, let's just say 50 times, 75 times, right? That's a couple of transformers that have to happen. There's breakers, there's service panels, all of that has to be added to be able to distribute that. So the presumption we made is that there's enough electricity load coming in there because we don't think that's where the problem is with the engineer. It's the distribution that on our side of the system, not the Rhode Island Energy side. So we don't think there would be necessarily Rhode Island Energy infrastructure work that has to occur to bring more electricity in.
John, did you have a question or a comment?
Well, I withdraw the question I might have asked.
Any just bottom line as you were going through it, Bill, just sort of a storyline in your head about the finances or, given your perspective, your experience, just anything that came to mind that we should think about?
No, as I looked at it, I mean, clearly, there's a reason why a lot of the survey results were looking to maintain revenue. What went through my mind is how much do we make off the golf course? Which
That's a good question. That's gone through my mind too.
But it seems like there's a heavy reliance on this, and I have thoughts about how that money can be used, maybe for other recreational uses throughout the town. But that is for another discussion, perhaps.
Great. All right, well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next item is discussion of Fort Getty identity. Cassie.
Yeah, so I don't know, identity or
Right.
like
Purpose.
defining the purpose, right? So I'll go back. The way it is defined right now on the town website is Fort Getty is a town-owned facility located at the terminus of Fort Getty Road, and it's 41 acres in size. And it's primarily a recreational vehicle campground that also contains a tent camping area. And then it lists the other amenities at the park. And last meeting, we discussed that it's a community park that happens to have a campground. So I was kind of curious how other parks kind of describe themselves. It's not really a mission statement because that's more for like an entity like a nonprofit or a rec department. So just as an example, some of the language from Roger Williams Park in Providence is that it's comprised of more than 435 beautiful acres and offering a range of recreational and educational opportunities. Roger Williams still serves as the people's pleasure ground that Horace Cleveland, the designer, intended, hosting family picnics, community festivals, weddings, and running groups. Each year, over 1.5 million visitors from around the state and beyond enjoy the same scenery and activities as past generations. The People's Park truly represents Rhode Island's rich history and diverse history. Thought that was kind of interesting because in some of the correspondence we've received, people have said this, use that language, People's Park. So, I'd like us to discuss, Fort Getty is, and then fill in the blank and see what we think based on what we've learned and from the survey data, what we think it is. I looked at the 2004 report and it did not have this definition in it. It described the park. And I think it's important for us to kind of start thinking about Fort Getty is. And if we don't have a specific definition, maybe just, the purpose of it and like some specific words we think might be helpful to include.
Well, we had talked earlier about, whether it's Fort Getty recreational facility or
Mhm.
what. And what came to mind at that point might be useful here, which is just Fort Getty Town Park.
Mhm.
I mean, it is a town park. And so maybe emphasizing that
Mhm.
would be helpful.
And Richard, earlier you talked about recreation. Do you want to, like, as a recreational, you use the word recreation.
Well, it's better than Fort Getty. I just thought if you used recreation, if somebody punches it in, they're going to say, okay, I can go do something there
Mhm.
instead of just Fort Getty Park.
Mhm.
And it's open to, if you look at Goddard Park, they're going to say they have the beach, they have the trails, they have horses and other things there, but
Mhm.
list all the recreational facilities that are there.
Mhm.
But if they list it, or if we decide we'll list it, I
Mhm.
think we should promote the open space first, the pavilion second, and
Mhm.
RV park or RV camping and camping might be lower on, because if whatever the first click is, will generate the revenue. So
Mhm.
I was thinking if we'll treat it as a recreational park and then put options like the pavilion to use first,
Mhm.
we might get more use of the pavilion. Maybe we don't need it,
Mhm.
but then maybe it will create more issues, but at least it puts the emphasis on increasing that usage, which is what people want. I just want people to realize they can go there, have fun. It's not a ball field. It's not this, just open space recreation, so they feel comfortable going.
Mhm. Right. So the Roger Williams Park, they use the word recreational and educational opportunities. So I think we could put that in there.
Mhm. I was looking because I started doing a draft of the report
Mm-hmm.
that's just basically the early findings as a setup, for the recommendations. And I didn't really do a very good job on this piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
For me, obviously, another word that's missing is community. So when we
Mhm.
talk about recreation, I don't know how you guys feel about including the word community in there too as a community space. Or does town park cover that?
It seems like the town park would cover it.
Mhm,
I don't know if we need to put community in there.
mhm,
I agree.
Otherwise, it sounds like it might just be the Beavertail community, 'cause
Mhm.
that's the closest community to it. I
Mhm.
would leave it as a town
Okay.
park or town recreation area.
I mean, I have sort of the details that follow it. The park, today, the park features XX acres of open space, 3 beaches, marshland, X miles of walking trail, a boat ramp, dock, outhalls, RV, tent campgrounds, event pavilion, sailing school,
Mhm.
and remnants of historic military batteries. It's a distinctive asset that serves a diverse array of users, including year-round residents, seasonal RV and tent campers, boaters, kayakers, blah, 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 and generates meaningful revenue for the town. So kind of you're looking for that all-encompassing first
One
sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so, but then this other question comes up of People's Park. It came through the correspondence we've received. Is that something that we want to think about?
It doesn't resonate with me.
Okay. No. The town park, though, encompasses that. I
I
think.
mean, what does that mean, the People's Park? Is it Lafayette Park across from the White House is People's Park, right? That's a place for First Amendment expression. Is that what we mean?
Right.
Personally,
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer something really simple
Yep.
and something which doesn't try to say too much about what it is, other than it makes it clear that it's no longer a military fort or a prisoner of war camp.
Okay.
So for me, recreation area, I mean, I grew up using it as a boat ramp, a place to go dig quahogs, and a place to go to the beach, and a place to walk the dogs around the trails. So and given that it's been an RV park for so long,
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of moving away from that word
Mm-hmm.
and just saying a recreational area.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because, you know, obviously one of the other things is, as we sit here and talk about it, we also think of Lot 22.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't think of Lot 22.
Mm-hmm.
People, you know, where does the park start?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, where does the park start? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the fort starts at the prisoner of war built
Pillars.
gate,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but that's not where the recreation area starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. What about, Cassie, you looked at a comparison, I think, was it the Portsmouth? Was it Melville? Which is the one that's actually a community park,
Mm-hmm.
a town park facility that has a campground within it?
Right. It was Melville. It's a Melville recreation area is what it's called. It's not necessarily called a park, but yeah, they call it a recreation area. And that's the closest to our space too.
I'm liking Richie's suggestion of
Mm-hmm.
calling it Fort Getty Recreation Area.
Yeah. I think it's-
Well, that comes from Cassie.
Oh, okay. I like Cassie's recommendation. That makes it broader. I do think that's kind of what we're doing. We're kind of
Mhm.
zooming out and thinking, yes, we have a campground, but it's much more than that.
Mhm. So Fort Getty is a recreation area. A town park and recreation area. One of the other things we've talked about is if one of our recommendations could be more signage and like education within the park. And so is it important to put education within there as well?
I mean, CISF makes it education,
Mhm. If
but it's not necessarily a town focused. I mean, at one point they had the playground program after school there. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a town own and manage recreation
area,
area.
that's great. Okay, there we go. We got it.
I do wonder, I mean, we probably don't want to say event, but the pavilion makes it more than just recreation. But do you want to take a stab at
Mhm.
doing that?
Mhm.
And then I'm promising a draft. So Cody, will you help me think about how I have to do this, given the open public meetings nature of this? Does all the drafting have to happen kind of in the open? How does that work?
No, for the actual like identity, which you want to write up as
For the report, for the actual final report, or
I would
drafts of the report?
I would say if members want to pick their piece, like I know Salmon's is focused more on the finances piece. The main thing is as long as three people don't communicate on any one component, I believe we should be good. But I would recommend that we do an actual workshop to maybe do the bulk of it in a meeting, and then potentially each person can bring a piece of the pie to that meeting.
So if you want to, and Cassie, you've already started, and I've taken a lot of what you've given me and put it in very rough form, along with other components that others have done. So I'll provide something for the next meeting, before the next meeting, and maybe, I know we have a workshop at the next meeting with Eric.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll have a chance to just do a little bit there as well, just missing, kind of edits the way we did today. I don't know.
That's
Okay.
fine.
And then we'll be able to look at something and react to it. But
Mhm.
anything else on that? Anybody? Okay, so the next item is Fort Getty governance and oversight. And actually Kathleen Brown's letter that was in the press and that came to us at the last session brought up governance. And I thought it was worth bringing up here. How have people thought about that? I don't have any comparators of similar places and what they might have. But just thinking about the long-term governance of Fort Getty, do we think that it might benefit from sort of a subcommittee or, a standing committee on Fort Getty? We're ad hoc, a committee of the town council, of the rec department. I mean, I don't know.
So when I was looking at some of the other parks as part of benchmarking, like within like the Melville one, I think they have a standing committee that works, is specific to the park, and I feel like that could be beneficial for Fort Getty. I mean, we keep like kind of being reactive um, and every so often establishing a committee. But I think if there were just one long-standing one, then they could work on some of these issues like over time.
Richie?
I'm a little, I guess, confused on this item. The rec department probably already has a list of rules, governance of the park. Are we trying to recommend that we change those? I'm a little confused on where we stand versus what the rec department's policy is. Are we totally going to try to rewrite it in another meeting? Everybody come up with a new law or rule or governance? Or should Ray be here and explain exactly what they have in mind? And I'm just, I don't know how far we're outreaching.
Are you talking about policy review or the governance one or both? Governance, okay.
Because that's all going to be in, if you read what you have to do to get into the park and what the rules and regulations are. I'm not sure what this pertains, and if you explain it better, then I'll probably get a clearer head around it. But right now, I'm not sure what we're doing with the rec department.
I mean, that's fair. We didn't put any description. It was really, we've been established as an ad hoc committee to think about the future of Fort Getty, and we've seen that there have been, these come up periodically. And if there were a standing committee that was almost advisory or providing oversight to the rec department, so that as people come and go, actually, that there's a body that is thinking over the long term about the health and welfare and viability of Fort Getty.
Right. So one of the things I've thought about from our last beta meeting is like, what is the scope of time for our work? Like, are we thinking like 10 years, 20, like, I don't know. And so that, I think that's kind of gets at that.
Yes, I started thinking through, I'm sorry, you want to, about governance, and if we were to form a standing committee, certainly prior ad hoc committees have suggested.
Yeah.
Having a standing committee. If we go down that path, I think that it might make sense to broaden it to a Parks and Recreation Committee
Oh,
and to actually speak to other parks. I mean, Taylor Point, I happen to volunteer out there and we're trying to clear it up, but it's fairly unused. And we have, there's people kicking around ideas about where could another boat ramp be? Maybe there should be a boat ramp to take the pressure off the one at Fort Getty. Is there any town land that would do that? How about looking at playing fields and bike paths and walking trails? So there's plenty of things that a standing committee could look to. And I think, to your point, Cassie, depending on what we develop here,
Mhm.
and if we are developing anything that requires a stepped approach or transition or
Mhm.
something put in place over time, it argues for a standing committee.
Yes, I agree.
You mentioned something about the duration, and what's our guidance and how long
Yeah.
it should last.
Mhm.
If we were to, well, we go forward with the electric, and the electric is based on all your numbers, I would think you would set a policy that the RV camping and no changes would occur over that lifespan, similar to what the CISF is. They have a 20-year and a 10-year. I think you would have to propose that if you're going to spend that kind of money, you would have to put in there that the RV camping is sustainable for 15 to 20 years. And it would have to be kind of a lease agreement, so somebody in 5 years doesn't say vacate that, and then the town is stuck with a bunch of pedestals
Mhm.
paying for a cost of the electricity that somebody's going to want to tear out in 10 years.
Mm.
So I think as far as duration goes, we should go with something similar to what the CISF, maybe not 30 years, but at least to cover the cost of the electric and maybe then some to make the profit. I get nervous if we have too many subcommittees because we'll have a committee now. We'll come up with recommendations. And then the committee in 3 years or the next committee can start to want to change things. And then it's back to every 5 years, we have a committee to try to decide what to do with Fort Getty. And then we're back to step one. And everybody's wasting their time, not wasting their time, putting in their time to come up with ideas again. I just think if we don't need a lot of oversight, I think that's up to the rec department and up to Ed to oversight that. I know it's a lot of work for Ed, but town council is actually, we're forgetting them. They control everything. So I just get nervous if we have too many committees going forward.
John?
So I can't remember whether it was the 94 plan committee or the 2005 committee, but they created a 5 or 10-year land use plan and then stuck around for a while to see that, I don't think the entire length of the land use plan, but at least the first few years of implementation. And I would have thought that that model that said, we'll have a set of recommendations, the town council will decide what it wants to go forward with, the land use plan will need to be built thereafter and managed against. And the question is whether, I mean, you don't really want the strategy, to Rich's point, you don't really want the strategy rethought every year. And you probably don't need to check in on everything every year. But on the other hand, you probably want to refresh it every 5 years because the community changes. Now, maybe the town council wants to do that, or maybe the town council wants to agree a plan that says, here's how we're going to oversee this land use plan in perpetuity, right? But I feel it's a tad early to create a new committee. I do think it's probably not our job, but I think the notion of consolidating a whole bunch of recreation focused committees into one is not a bad idea at all. I'm not sure I would create a new committee for Fort Getty in perpetuity, but I would want to make sure that the town council had figured out how it was going to deal with the evolution of the plan.
I mean, that makes sense. I do think of governance as the way that, so a lot of this obviously does fall to the town council. And the town council, you could have a whole new town council at an election. So it hasn't really happened, I don't think recently, but the governance ensures that there's consistency over time, regardless of those ebbs and flows politically. And, you know, Ed and Ray may be here for 10 or 20 more years, but they may not. So I think of governance as providing long-term attention and continuity. It doesn't have to be a committee. It doesn't have to be a 5-member committee. It could be, you know, just some mechanism that the town council considers to think either about Getty in particular, or maybe it is more broadly about recreation facilities. So, yeah. All right. Well, something to think about. I think it will be something we'll come up again. We'll talk about it as part of our recommendations. So something to think about.
Madam Chair, can I just
Yeah.
offer a couple of comments
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
on the subject? So just for a starting point to understand kind of the process of rules and policy and maintenance and what gets done, particularly at Fort Getty, and what that looks like and how that gets done. So it starts with the staff, makes its way to Ray as a department head, then to me, and then to the council. So a change of policy and rules has to be approved by the council. So regardless of the origin of them, if there were a committee, standing committee, I believe it would still have to go back to the council. So I
Definitely.
appreciate your concern about changes in council and maybe different views on what they choose to do. But unless there's a change in the charter and ordinance, I believe that would be necessary to completely remove that power from the council. I'm not sure you achieve that, right?
I don't
So-
think that's not what's intended at
Yeah.
all. It's really, it would be almost like this committee
Sure.
that has no power, but only kind of oversight and, you know, attention. They would be an arm of the town council essentially.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to use Richard's example, you know, if this committee makes a recommendation to the town council and the town council next week's endorses putting 50 pedestals in and spending $500,000 down there, the reality is the next town council could say, we want you to take that out.
Right.
And I don't see that changing whether there's a standing committee or not. That's kind of what my point is. So I realize that's a very dramatic example, but that's the reality of what it is. And to talk about Bill's suggestion about an overall overarching recreation committee, there's a lot of things to consider when looking at that, right? Because there's a lot of overlap when you talk about boat ramps, for example. We have Harbor Commission. When you talk about the use of Taylor Point, we have Conservation Commission. We have the Tree Committee who has offered advice about Fort Getty to you already. So there's a lot of overlap already in terms of what committees do. Just something to think about if you're going to contemplate another layer of committees of how that all intersects together to make that work, to make it successful if you so choose to do that.
So maybe this is too detailed, but benches. My pet peeve about Fort Getty, the benches. Who decides, and I'm not saying maybe a committee wouldn't have this power.
Mhm.
Someone makes a donation and wants to have a memorial bench. How does that happen?
So it's a policy that was adopted that we proposed to the town council about benches, regardless of where they are in town. So the policy is if you want to donate a bench, there would be an available list of locations that's developed by the staff, not because individuals want it. And I absolutely respect why people want it in a certain place. But that being said, we can't always meet those requests, right? We need to balance the needs and what's appropriate townwide for memorial benches, as an example. So there's a policy that we drafted that the town council adopted that essentially says you're on a list for a bench. When locations become available, you be offered a location. So if in the development of your work, you say, hey, there'd be great places for the benches. 1, 2, 3. Eric says, yeah, I agree. Those are where they are. Those would be available for people. The intent of the policy was not, again, all due respect to those people asking to donate benches, to not let them dictate where the benches go, regardless of the operation and function of the park. but that policy is already adopted and in place.
Great.
It's
thank-
relatively new, so it takes a moment for us to get caught up on it. That's all.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this? Again, we'll come back to it, I think, in the reporting. What?
I don't know if this is under this heading or not, but as I was thinking about various things related to it, one we've discussed, which is regarding the historic structures and possibly reaching out to the Rhode Island Historic Commission. If I was thinking, oh, this could be something that a committee could continue working on, but we probably should be requesting a study of the historic structures and what we can do with them, and whether we can remove a bunch of pads that are out there, which I
Yeah.
assume we can.
I talked to the Rhode Island Historical, and
Okay,
they've never done a full assessment. And
Right.
it's really up to us whether or not we want to do that and whether or not we want to recommend that. I think there are pluses and minuses of doing that. They recommended this Battlefield Foundation could potentially provide funding to do it. We need to think about why do we want to do that? What would it enable us to do? What would it limit us from doing? So I think, Ed, you spoke to them as well in terms of just redoing the bathroom, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different answers here. So for the SHPO, State Historic Office, to come in and do an assessment of all of the structures in the park, the chair is correct, right? They would seek funding to do that. They're not going to do that just at our request because there's no permitting process in place. There is so we talk about concrete pads. If we made an application to CRMC to remove or modify something, they would have to review it. And they have to do that at no cost, but it's piecemeal to do it.
Yeah.
It's not looking at the entire park and structure. So if there was an appetite to do it, to look at the forts specifically, right? That I would suggest might be a relationship you want to improve with the Historical Society and build upon their relationship.
right.
I wouldn't put out a limb, but they might have a method of finding funding for you to have that part of it done to look at the park, right? There are other grant opportunities that the chair mentioned, but specifically to work within the park, right? So for example, the lower bathroom. So we're in contact with the SHPO to talk about potentials of what can happen at the lower bathroom, right? So that's the limited to the scope of what they're looking at. That is it. So
And that's triggered by CRMC, right? So if you have to get some permitting from CRMC, they have to go to SHPO.
there's a number of ways that you end up at SHPO. It's federal dollars are involved in the process, or there's a CRMC permit, or there's a specific request about a specific building. So the third one, they don't have to commit to doing that. So we don't have a commitment that they're going to do that as of this point.
Okay.
So I do think, I mean, it's something we have to think about. Will we make that recommendation or not?
Yeah.
What's the value to having it inspected and established as a historic, like we have to pay money to have them inspect it, but then why would we do that?
We'd be part of the historic register.
Okay.
I think it would come with a lot of limitations and oversight
Yeah.
for anything we wanted to
That-
do.
Yeah, there's a cost to it. Yeah.
Okay.
The next one is just park policy review. I wanted to put this on here again, thinking about ultimately the report, which is just around the corner. We've heard, and I also wrote to Ray, I think over the weekend, and said we have some policies that he's provided to us in terms of like pavilions, et cetera, that we may not want to do anything with. But then I know around things like RV camping, we heard as much in the surveys about some of the activities and policies around RV and tent camping that we might want to think about. You know, things about, do you favor people who have been here years before or not?
So are you requesting policies from Ray that he's following now? Review?
For what exists, yeah, I didn't happen to find them on the website. I know they must exist somewhere for an RV camper to see when they sign up, or a tent camper. I think tent camping, they actually have them on there. But based on what we've read, what you've thought from our visits, from the research that we've done, if there are things that are important to you, to start to write those down.
Okay.
That you'd like to see.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful, and Leela's here today, I mean, she's certainly, I would
Hi, Leela.
classify her as the subject
Yeah,
matter
yeah, yeah.
expert on policy and rules, particularly when it relates to camping. But all of that is a document or various forms of documents. Would you like us to provide all
Yeah.
of those? You can kind of
Perfect.
digest them and say, hey,
Yeah.
this one works. I've seen this somewhere else. Maybe we need to change that.
That'd be great. I know that we have a comprehensive look at the policies in terms of the pavilion, but if we could get them for other parts of the park and even things I might not be thinking to ask you. You know, are there any limits now on the number of boats or boat trailers that can go in there in a day? Or is it just capacity that ends up managing that? Or, you know, just policies we should be thinking about that we might not even be asking you about?
Okay, did you want a specific answer about the number of boats that we allow in the park, or were you just more?
No, I mean,
about-
I'm just in terms of, I know the policies that I've heard about that I can ask you about.
Sure.
But there may be things that I don't even know that I should be asking you about. So I don't want to not ask the question and
Sure.
not get the answer.
Yeah, so obviously the pavilion, tent camping, RV camping, boat parking, storage, launching, all have their own documents, and I'd be happy to provide them
Excellent.
for you.
That would be great.
Parking is a
Thank
good
you.
one too. Yeah.
What's that?
Parking.
Parking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so that's it. I guess I would just say, well, I'll wait till the final item in this. So next up is public comments. Are there any scheduled requests for comments?
Not before the meeting, but right before the meeting started, there was one individual who said they'd like to speak.
Okay. Yeah, ready. You have to stand, come to the microphone and tell us who you are and where you live.
Okay, I am Aidan Petrie. I live on Fort Getty Road, 105. So just for the record, Kate and I have been on Fort Getty Road for 25 years. In 25 years, I've never once complained at all about the RV park. But I will have a little terminology component there, which I'm going to add in, which is not actually an RV park. It is principally a trailer park. And there is a pretty clear distinction. Nonetheless, never complained about them, never complained about the campus. But I do have a perspective, and it has grown stronger, mostly because of the CISF. And that is that the dynamic of that area is changed. And I'm really thankful, frankly, that everybody here is taking this on, because when you've got 600 kids arriving in that space, plus the trailers and the fishermen and all the things that go on, and it's pretty dynamic. I mean, we walk it a lot. It needs to be thought of, and one word that I think is really critical here is safety. And like I said, I've never had any major issues. It has one or two humorous ones, but I think we need to bring that in and think about the safety component of it. When the survey came out, I thought it was pretty interesting, and it covered a lot of bases. The two things that came out of it were, one, revenue is important, and two, open space is important. And then there was a bunch of stuff about dog leashes, which came in. And so with that in mind, it strikes me, and I retired 2 weeks ago, and Kate and I got in the car and we went on an RV trip. I learned a bit about RVs. And so it does seem, and this is intended to be an encouraging discussion. It does seem like we have all the components available to maintain, maybe at a limited number, if we up the fees to what they should be. I mean, we shouldn't be discounting our best piece of land here. If we up the fees a bit, we can drop the number of RVs a little bit. And if we can do that, we have opened up more open space. I'm hearing a lot today, which I just commend. I think it's appropriate. Having rules of the road, looking at how the turnover of the trailers is. There was a lot of commentary about people who feel they're entitled to them. You know, at the end of the day, it's privilege. They're privileged to be on this piece of land. I have another comment which probably won't go down terribly well, but I'll put it out there anyway, which is if we are generating money out of the this park, to my mind, some of it should be retained by the people operating the park. And I think that's generally a good practice. So rather than just taking everything out and paying a series of other bills there, to have something that is a line item to improve, whether it's the historic battlements or the, whatever it is, I think it gives, there's a chap called Ray, who I don't know, but Kate says is very nice, who is running this and create a little bit of breadth for him to, and his team to maintain that. Rules you've talked about and so forth. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you.
And I've
Thank
gone
you.
back to work, which isn't very much time.
Thank you. And we received your other earlier comments too, that you sent, the assessment of the survey using, using Claude. We all did the same thing.
So, anyway, thank you for
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes. Hi.
I live on 34 Whale Rock Road. So I have a comment, and then am I allowed to also ask questions?
No, it's just a comment,
Just-
period. You can ask them, but you might not get answers.
The comment is just, I took the survey and the way the prior speaker described the results, that people are in favor of open space and in favor of revenue, want 500,000 or don't want 500,000. That sort of as a result, as I read the survey, and I've done a lot of surveying, that it seemed like you could reach that conclusion. I was surprised by the headline in the paper that said the vast majority of the people support RVs. I happen not to, and the vast majority of the people I happen to talk to don't support. So certainly they support revenue. So I was thinking about some of the financial presentation. I have a background in finance and strategy consulting, and I can't help but notice that asset from a town standpoint is an incredibly valuable asset, and one that's probably, like most waterfront property on Jamestown, appreciated over 100% the last 10 years. And when I look at the relative rents, how they've progressed, it just seems to me, and I actually support subsidized housing, but it seems like we are in the business of, we've made a policy decision to subsidize it by having this, because we're not, at least as far as I can tell, and maybe this is the question, where do I look to see how we're setting rents and where those policies are? And then I would also ask, this goes to, I thought it was interesting that there was made a decision to strike the governance objective of this committee, but I think it's hard to find out from the outside how we're setting rents and how we're allocating what the real.
Do you mean fees?
Yeah, well, we're renting for the summer a plot of land at the town, so RV fees, yes.
I think that the town, I mean, they can let you know that, right? To Parks and Rec, if you called Ray DeFalco, he'll tell you. I'm sure it's on the website. I just didn't see it.
How fees are
But
set?
yeah, we've talked about it here. We've had a whole presentation here. So you can, it's definitely available, readily available.
Got it. So that's how I would look at it. Does not, was there an analysis in those presentations of what market would suggest should?
Yes.
And do you feel that's been done?
I think that's part of what our overall work is, and we'll be making some comments, I imagine, in our report. We haven't done that in any way to report to you on today, but
Fair enough. And was part of that also, it seemed to me, to make the decision that prior renters had first right, was also assigning an option value that wasn't clear why you would.
if you go to the website at Parks and Rec, if you go to the town website and go to Fort Getty or Parks and Rec, and then there's a portal for Fort Getty, you'll see what the policies are in terms of right of first refusal or
Yeah.
how they make decisions. Okay. Yeah.
There's some real economic value to granting that, and what I didn't see is the why are we behind us. So that's all. It seemed like another bit of subsidizing the housing that wasn't explained. So at any rate, is there a place to get an answer to the why?
You can, Leila, could he talk to you after this meeting or give a call to Ray DeFalco? Okay, or you can direct him.
Yeah,
to-
I'd be happy to talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great,
And I do
thank you.
appreciate everybody putting time. A lot of work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, hi.
Hello, everyone, Kathleen Brown, 995 Fort Getty Road. Thank you for all the work you're doing on this. I know it's a bear. I know you hear from me a lot too, but I care. I care. I am engaged, and I care not just as a resident of Fort Getty Road, but as a really engaged member of this community. So I really want the work you do to not be in vain. It's been disheartening when I've attended giant meetings and heard council members say, yeah, there was a committee in 94, and there was a committee in 2004. Yeah, well, they didn't get anything done. Yeah, well, it had no teeth. So I really have stayed in touch with what you guys are doing because I know you're still advisory, but I want this to have some teeth. I want you to really feel like you put your time in this winter and something got done, right? So that is my wish for all of you and for all of our benefit. So given that, I think that's why I put forward the recommendation to think beyond your ad hoc committee's scope of work and what happens next. And I'm not talking about the day-to-day policy operation things that of course fall under the purview of the paid professionals who run the space, but what's going to keep the momentum? What's going to keep the town council tuned into the priorities of this great resource? And if it's such a valuable revenue generating resource, why wouldn't we want a more permanent standing group of engaged residents to continue to have some oversight concern about what's the future and how's the future being shaped, especially since we know how the appetite for addressing it for the town council is limited. They've got a lot on their plate, so it can't always bubble to the top of their priorities, and they have turnover. So for a few reasons, I think it makes some sense to be part of your committee's recommendation, to include in your recommendations something with a little bit more permanent vision and work and advising and research to help both the staff and the town council continue to evolve the work that you've started, right? So that we don't have another yeah, well, they recommended that in 2026, but of course, there's no appetite on the town council to come up with the funding to do that. So whatever, we don't want that to happen for you or for any of us. Okay, I have one other, what was going to be a question. Maybe it's just a comment, but so your survey did decide that revenue was the most important thing for Fort Getty. And I think that's a little bit limited thinking. I'm not sure that fully represents blue sky, what the park could be and whether or not there could be funding to find greater use. But given that priority and respecting that and the town's limited budget, so wanting to preserve revenue, what I'd like to know, the question after that in the survey said, how important is new types of revenue at Fort Getty? And so I haven't heard this committee address that. And I want to know, what are you doing in your committee work, R&D wise, to put forward recommendations for new types of revenue that can help this wonderful resource be a revenue generating help to the rest of our town needs. And so thirdly, it's just want to repeat what other folks have said about the line item specificity of the revenue. And I really think that it should go specifically into a Parks and Rec line item so that the Parks and Rec professionals can figure out how to allocate the revenue that comes into this Parks and Rec area, but use it for Parks and Rec priorities. And so that doesn't get swallowed up and absorbed into a general operating budget. And that way, so many of the Parks and Rec priorities that seem to have been outlined by the comprehensive plan for the town and within your survey have been identified by your fellow residents as important. let's put some teeth to that then and find a way to let some of this revenue have a very specific purpose towards multiple recreational priorities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Okay, the next item, no communications received since our last meeting. And then looking ahead to our next meeting, we have a date set, yes, in April?
For the April 7th meeting, and then we had floated a second meeting later in April, but it looks like there's limited availability the week of the 21st through the 23rd. And I did check the council chambers are available the entire week afterwards. So I was wondering the committee's availability for either I believe it was the 28th or the 30th.
I'm available both days.
Okay.
I'm not available. And I was hoping that we'd be on a 2-week schedule and aim for May 5th and May 19th. But if it would be great for my schedule.
So does a 2-week schedule mean not in April? Only one?
Well, I'm not around in April, so
Okay.
it's up to you all.
Yeah. Well, we're going to meet on the 7th. It's the 7th?
Yep, the 7th.
Yeah, for a workshop with Eric.
Right.
And they're set for that. And then I think we need to meet one more time because I think May is going to be focused on nailing down the report to meet the June.
And this is the only space we can use to meet.
It'd be the easiest space. There might be I could see the library if there's any availability, but this is essentially the best meeting room, especially because of the now reporting requirements for video and audio.
Does everybody else except for Bill, are you able to be here either the 28th or 30th?
Mm-hmm.
Those work for
Yes.
me. Okay,
All right, I can send out an availability schedule as well as
great.
we can potentially keep that 2-week and still do the earlier May 5th, May 19th area.
Those work for me. Okay.
So I'll send out essentially an April and May availability email.
Yeah, so I just think the next meeting will be an important one. I think it will be one of our last with Eric. Maybe we'll have one more, but I think we have to come really prepared with any proposals to be thinking about to be included in a final report in terms of recommendations so that we can, the way I'm thinking about it, and I welcome anybody's ideas, is that we get things out and we may just have to deliberate and debate with one another on things to include.
So we're going to come up with a final proposal?
I think, yes, it would be great coming into our next meeting if you have a very clear sense, particularly of anything that you want to have Eric pursue as part of his design.
So we have the last presentation he had. So we'll base everything we see on that. We're going for the 7th.
For the 7th, yeah. I mean, are there things, what's on your mind?
No, I'm just trying to think if we're going to finalize it. I had to leave a little early at the last meeting and we had 2 options, kind of moving the campers. It was still left up in the air, maybe moving roads and open space. I'm assuming that nothing's changed on those drawings and we're just going to finalize.
I met with him earlier this week. He has another round that he's working on based on that meeting because we did deliberate. I was uncomfortable. I think you were uncomfortable with a lower number of 50. So he has a different iteration that has, a halfway point. And I've asked him to really think about for our next meeting that part of the battery, the fort that he has talked about that could, I think, is such a gem in what we're ultimately going to propose. And what does that really look like?
Do we need to propose a location for a new bathroom, or, because that was kind of left open when the discussion was going on?
Sure. I mean,
Or
I
do
think
we just
anything that
go
you,
ahead?
no, I think if you have things that you want to see in this report,
On the
come,
location?
yeah,
Okay.
come, we can, and I think there'll be things, whatever Eric is doing is going to support what we are proposing. So you can get it with him. I think there can be things that we propose that aren't necessarily in the designs, but
Yeah, Marissa, I've come up with, I've reworked a design for 50. And would like, I will circulate that. I will send it to Cody, to go to all of us and Eric well in advance, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll do that.
So, also, we haven't talked about beaches or parking. Will that be part of that next meeting?
I think so. I
Okay.
definitely said those were things that we need to focus on,
Okay.
the beaches and parking and
Yeah.
trailer parking and kind of traffic flow.
Okay.
One point that came up about the pier and the water type and the boat ramp. And I know, Jim, your Harbor Commission is working on that proposal. It's come to my attention that there is a new bill in front of the House that is proposing a 2-year committee of CRMC to consider water type. And so, that is maybe a possibility going forward, but it's probably going to be up to them and whether that gets approved. I'm sure it's probably being done for quid nescit, but we don't know. In thinking about it, I would be strongly in favor of changing the water type to type 2, because if you read the CRMC Red Book, they want to get rid of any pier that is in type 1 waters. And so what they do in the future, if it's still type 1 to that pier, we should perhaps be in favor of changing the water type.
I have a letter from the Conservation Commission. I have a letter from CISF. And I have asked the chair here for a letter also concerning water usage. The Conservation Commission has stated in their letter they support the use of a special exception, not of a water type change. I don't consider that conversation yet ended, especially if we can rally support from other communities, other user communities, in which might help tip the scale towards a type 2 change. Nonetheless, ultimately, it's up to the CRMC, as well as whether or not we're able to even just carve some piece of the type 1 water into a type 2 versus the surrounding body of water, which is all type 1.
So do you have a timeline on that? Because he did raise that with me last time, and I said, of course, I'm not going to do a letter unless we have a chance to talk about it here. And we haven't put that on the agenda. I don't know what the timing is of that. And then also, I think the town council needs to we can't be sending things as an ad hoc committee without some.
Understand your position. I don't have a current timeline. I would like to move on this quickly because the Harbor Commission is looking to try and make inroads with some plans for a touch and go dock down there, which will not happen without either the special exception or a water reclassification. I am happy to speak with town council about what I've asked you for, if that would help.
Let me talk to Ed. I mean, how do people feel about that here? I mean, I guess we'd have to have a draft to look at, but you're comfortable with that?
I mean, I think the touch and go dock keeps coming up. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a no-brainer for us to support it.
As far as changing the classification, I'd go for the exemption. If we're supporting the marsh and open space and all of what we agreed on, where it's contradicting if we change the water quality there. So I'd be in favor of just a isolated instance of putting the dock in, but not taking the water quality, because we're defeating the purpose. Plus, it just opens the gates to ruin all of that area eventually, because it will just could keep creeping.
Sorry, if we could have this be an item for the next
Yeah,
um,
okay,
a-
that sounds
agenda, just
good.
because it's starting to kind of turn more into discussion about the item at
Okay.
large.
Great.
Um,
And then you could do a more formal presentation?
Sure.
Do you think? Yeah.
So we'll place that on the April 7th. So all we have is
Great.
that and the workshop. Is there any other items the committee would like to see?
I'm going to give a draft report
Okay.
for people to see. Now I'm committed. So I know.
Give a deadline.
I can't promise the quality. I'm very iterative in my writing. Okay. Anything else for next meetings or anything? Any other comments, additional agenda items for the future? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
So,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you.